Good morning, everyone. This is Britt Simon. So I thought I'd jump on live and take some of your questions. A couple of updates for you as well, just something that may be of interest to you. So a couple of things that I wanted to cover. Firstly, there is no, let me just set up this screen. There is no update about DV 2020 or DV 2021. We're still waiting. We just have to wait for that, I'm afraid. In terms of DV 2024 that's currently in progress, Zarthesius updated the data yesterday, and we can see now that 28,000 people have been scheduled, about 13,500 cases. We've got just over 10,000 visas issued at this point in the whole world, right? So, and Africa is kind of, as usual, trailing EU in terms of issuances. That tends to always be the case. You'll actually see sort of a slightly odd thing here, that usually about this time of year, somebody starts talking about the racism against Africa. And what those people never seem to take into account is that there's a huge number of cases additionally being scheduled in Africa compared to EU or any other region. It's simply that the average case has a much lower derivative rate than we see in other regions. And so, that's a problem. Obviously, that means that there will be less issuances when we look at the numbers of issued, even though the number of cases, the number of interviews, the number of cases going through is higher in Africa than in Europe. So to me, it's not something you can blame the US government for, that each interview they set up for an African case is on average less derivatives than each case they set up for an Asian or an African or an EU case. So it is something that sort of comes up. So 6,300 cases have been scheduled for Africa versus 4,148 for EU at this point. So almost 50% more, actually just slightly over 50% more interviews have been set up for EU. But that's, you can see the numbers of actual people there, that's not 50% more, right? So 10,414 from 4,148 there. So that's 10,414 people on 4,148 cases, as opposed to nearly 12,000 people on 6,300 cases. So less than two on average there. Less than two people per case is what I'm trying to say there. So it's the derivative rate that really accounts for the low number of issuances that we see every year in Africa as compared to EU. Now, that does mean they have to do more work. Essentially, they have to have more interviews, and that's an important thing to see. Because Zarthesius updated his data, you can go in and you can check out on his website, his fabulous website here. You can go and check how your embassy is faring in terms of how many interviews they took in this particular month. And you can see, for example, that Nairobi took, on the 19th, they took 103 cases. And up to that point, they had taken nearly 893. Okay. Now and you can see this for any embassy. So I'm not going to do many of these, but you can come along and see these. Cairo is one that I was interested in seeing this month. On the 19th, they took 144 cases. That's almost what they had achieved in the previous 3 months, right? So that's or half rather. So that's an improvement in their pace of issuance of scheduling, but it's not as fast as they should be going. They should be doing more than that, right? And if we look at some of the sort of less good embassies, Alice had a slight improvement this month. I'm all over the place this morning with my terminology, but on the 12th, they took 113, big increase from what they managed to do in the previous months. But again, this is not enough. 113 is not enough. I did have an interesting conversation with someone, by the way, in one of the Telegram channels, who wanted to calculate where Addis Ababa would get to if they scheduled around about 100 interviews per month. And there's a way that we can do that, right? So you can actually sort of try and predict, if they scheduled this number of interviews per month, what case number would they get to? And roughly the answer to that came out that if they scheduled around about 100 cases per month, then Addis Ababa would get to about case number 25 or 26,000, roughly. Okay. Now that's a complete guess. We don't know that they're going to schedule 100 cases per month, but they have to keep up that sort of pace. If they increase that pace, then that number could go higher. And if they decrease that pace of scheduled interviews, then that number could go lower. And last year they only got to 20,000. So it would not be, at all shocking if they end up at somewhere in the sort of 20 to 25,000 range. And that would mean that they would need to do this sort of performance each and every month for the remaining 6 months of scheduling. Which, is that likely? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to show you was that the December official issuance statistics have been issued here. And you can see those stats on Zarthisius's site. If you're interested in seeing that, you can see he's added the December data already into his site there, where he's got the annual numbers and the monthly numbers. This is the official issuance data. Now, SEAC data is official data, and it's much more up to date, but it's interesting to look at for me, I think it's interesting to see what the embassies are doing. And so what I like to do is I like to go and look at these two reports. So for December, issuances by place of birth and visa class, that's interesting. But for me, I look at it by post. Now, why am I looking at this? Well, I want to pay attention to what any particular embassy is doing for DV cases versus immediate relative cases. So if you want to know, for example, why there's a big delay in Accra, we can look at, in December, they issued 10 DV cases, but in that same exact month, for IR 1, 2, and 5, they issued, 500 and something cases. So they, for every one issuance of a DV case that they did in Accra, they issued 50 immediate relative cases. It is very, very clear where their preference lies, where their priority lies, in terms of where they're going to put the workload. They are putting the workload into immediate relative cases. So the embassies that do that will cause a backlog. That's basically that's basically what's happening. So if you want to know whether the backlog is decreasing from a DV point of view at an embassy, then you need to look at the contrast between DV cases and immediate relative. Okay, now immediate relative cases, I've explained before, is immediate relatives, spouses, children, or parents of US citizens. So those cases are given the highest priority, and they should be. But not all embassies have the same number of IR cases coming into their mix, right? So in Abu Dhabi, for example, they only did 2 DV cases, but was it because they did a lot more on immediate relative? Not really. They did some. They did 50. So it's a 25 to 1. But does that mean that there was a backlog, or is it simply that they had a low number there? We'd have to look at the data. In Addis, why is Addis still going slow? Well, in DV, they did 20 cases in Addis, and look what they did for IR 1, 2, 3, and 5. They did 320, 450, about 450. Right. So again, they consistently over the last 3 months have been doing much more work in Addis on immediate relatives than DV cases. If you look at a good performing, let's have a look at Ankara is probably another one that we should look at from a backlog point of view. Why are they sort of on a backlog? They did 109. That's a better number for them. 109 there, and they're almost balanced with the immediate relatives. So that to me shows that there should be a bit of a balance between those cases. There's roughly the same number of immediate relatives issuances as there are DV. That's a pretty good sign. That could mean that Ankara could do better in the coming months, right? Let's look at something. Let's have a look at Beirut, for example. Beirut is still massively exceeding DV. They did none, and they have DV cases to do. But for immediate relatives, they did 160, 260, 300 or so, right? So Beirut is giving most of their effort to immediate relative cases. If we look at an embassy that is not Backlog, let's look at Casablanca, for example. Casablanca. Okay, so Casablanca for DV did 202 issuances in December. And then if we look at the immediate relative numbers, they're much lower. So Casablanca are doing all the work they need to do on DV. And it's not that they're not doing IR cases, it's that they don't have a big backlog of IR cases and therefore aren't expected to do those. So 130 versus 202, they actually did more DV cases than immediate relative, right? If you want to look at something wild, you look at Havana. Let's have a look at Havana. Havana has a very big population of parents and particularly parents being brought to America by their U.S. citizen children, right? So if we look at the IR cases, they did a massive number of IR cases. IR5 are parents of U.S. citizens, for which there's supposed to be no delay, no waiting period, no numeric limitations on the IR cases. And so, they did 1,800 or so, but we can't really complain about Havana because they are getting through their DV cases as well, right? They're just doing a lot of work, basically. And they're doing everything they can to get through the cases. Okay, so come and have a look at the December reports. It's interesting. If you want to know what your embassy is doing, whether they're doing DV cases or whether they're doing immediate relative cases, you can tell a lot from this report. Okay, come and have a look at that. Okay, let me take some questions now, and I'll try and go quickly through the questions I've got here. Good morning to you all anyway. Okay. Will the visa bulletin for Africa get to 75K with the current embassy performance? It could do. If you have a look at my YouTube channel, I published a video about 3 or 4 weeks ago that really tried to give some predictions on what Africa could do mathematically. And I took into account the current embassy performance at that time. So go and have a look at that video. It does say that 75,000 is kind of in the range where it might be possible to get current to that point, but there's some risk at that range, right? So it's not 100% certain that we'll get to that range by any means. Can my uncle collect the green card on my behalf after a short activation trip? You can't collect it, but you can give his address in the USA. So you go in for an activation trip for your green card, I presume we're talking about, and you give his address as the place to send your green card. It will be sent to his address even though you've left the country, right? As long as you've paid. So that's perfectly okay. May I request reviewing on Asia Burma? You can go have a look at that, both on Zarthisius' site and also on the official issuance site. Go and have a look. My numbers box is 70K, but so far I don't have the appointment. Yeah, you've broken a couple of cardinal sins there. You've not given me your region, so I don't know which region you're talking about. You haven't mentioned your embassy, so I can't say anything about your question. In 4 months, 4,636 visa issued in EU region. Change your prediction or staying same on visa bulletin is exactly what the current progress is exactly what I would be expecting to see in a well-run year. They're slightly ahead of DV 2023 in terms of issuances. At this point last year, they weren't quite at this level. They're exactly on numbers. So it doesn't change my my position at all. It's what it should be. And you know, you can't look at these numbers minute by minute and try and adjust your predictions. The mathematical predictions about the end of the year don't really correspond with the Visa Bulletin movement and the month-to-month numbers. That's not really the point. The mathematical predictions are about how many people could be issued and what case number we could get to. It doesn't mean that's what they will do, right? And so you don't connect the dots on those two things. So you asking me to change my, or if I should change my predictions because of month-to-month performance doesn't make sense, really, right? It's not connected in the way that you think it is, right? Can the officer have the questions have any questions if the marriage took place after the lottery results were announced? Absolutely, yeah. There are some people who try and get an extra green card by fraudulently marrying someone that they're not in a true relationship with, right? So in order to, if you do get married, particularly after the results are announced, you must go to the interview with some proof of your relationship. And that would be previous details about your relationship, that, you know, maybe you took some trips together, took a vacation together or something. Maybe you have got a bunch of texts that were dated before your win. If you got married, normally when you get married, you have family and friends. Did you have a big wedding? Are there photos of that wedding? Do you live together? You know, can you prove that you live together? Do you have bills coming to the house? You know, there's various things that you can do, but you need to prove that your relationship is real, okay? And not just for the sake of an extra green card. Now, having said that, if you've been in a real relationship for some years, but you never bothered to get married, then you won the lottery and you realized, oh, we better get married. That is much easier to prove and totally normal to get married. Like, why wouldn't you get married at that point, you know, in order to get the extra green card? So what I'm saying is it's not illegal to get married to get the extra green card for someone that you're truly in a relationship with. What's illegal, what will get you both disqualified and banned for life, is if you marry essentially a stranger or the sister of one of your friends or something like that, simply to get the visa. That will get you banned. You'll lose your green card opportunity. You'll probably be banned for life, and so will the other person. Okay, so don't do that. That would be dumb. Rabbit trail. I talked to some other DV channel. Oh dear. They charge $72 for less than what you do. So even I could make some dollars with what I learned so far. Crazy to think about. Yeah, that's the problem. Some people learn a little bit of information and all of a sudden they think they're experts in the DV lottery, and they go start selling that information and they don't know what the hell they're doing. It worries me. It's, you know, it's annoying, but yeah, you know, it's not much I can do about that. Good morning, ICC. Yes, I would say that Cairo is doing a little bit better with 144 2NLs in January. They're doing better than they were, right? Are they doing well enough? No, they're not doing well enough. They have about 11,000 people who would normally be scheduled, would normally be assigned to that embassy, many of whom have got pretty low case numbers, right? And so they need to be, let's say 11,000, about 5,500 cases, let's say, roughly. So in order to get through all of that workload, they should be doing, you know, 200, 300, 400 cases in a single month, right? So 144 is better than it was, but it's nowhere near what it should be. So there is a backlog, and the backlog, even in January, a month where they took 144, the backlog increased, right? It wasn't enough even to cope with that additional backlog. By the way, most embassies increased their backlog in January in Africa because the Africa number moving to 40,000 was too high. That was too big of a jump. Even the highest performing embassies are now backlogged a little bit but they're only backlogged in this month, and they can catch up with that quite easily in a single month. How would they do that? Well, they would do that by not increasing the visa bulletin very much next month. That's what they should do. Now, will they follow my advice on that? Will they follow logic on that? I don't know. But if we see a big increase in Africa, it doesn't mean that there's going to be a lot more cases scheduled. It will mean that they will have an even bigger backlog to deal with at some of these embassies, most of the embassies. Okay. Another person who doesn't understand about, case number is 4127. Firstly, I don't need to know your precise number. Secondly, unless you give me the region, I have no idea what region that is. And unless you tell me, the country that you're from, or, it really is completely pointless. So that's just a completely pointless question, right? I can't answer you if you can't make it easy for me, right? I can't read your mind. Ni Manu, I get a lot of help from you when my family won the lottery. How can I give a bag? Even a Windows might show my appreciation, sir. A bag? I don't know what you mean by a bag, but you showed your appreciation just now by saying thank you. That's all I ask. That's lovely. There is a donation page on my blog at britsimonsays.com, but that's not important to me. I don't need any money, and the donation page actually goes to a little fund where I do things with my daughter. Just buy her treats, and I think we bought her last phone actually using that money. So that's what I've done in the past. But honestly, just saying thank you is lovely. Thank you for saying thank you. I'm happy I could help. Hoping Cairo would get to 55K. Yeah, I'll have to look at that ICC. In fact, you have a look at it. You've been watching enough of my videos. Tell me whether you think that's possible, but give me some numbers to support that, right? Tell me what you think is the highest case number, then work out how many Egyptian cases there should be per 1,000, right? You should be able to do that. And also look at Sudanese cases and see where they stand. Have a look at that. I'll be really interested in your numbers, right? How is Joburg doing? They're doing okay. They're not doing badly at all. They don't tend to get heavily backlogged because it's not a huge number of cases at that embassy for the size embassy it is. It's relatively easy for them to work with. If I just check on here, I think they probably have quite a bit of IR cases, but I don't think it's a problem. Johannesburg. They did no DV. That's a bit weird. No DV cases in December. Don't know why that is. So have a look at the numbers on Zarthis' site and see if they're more backlogged than I thought. But generally speaking, I wouldn't generally worry about Joburg, to be honest. Okay. What is submit date on Zarthis' website for a case number? Is it the date that DS260 got processed? Looking at ANT. The submit date, if you had looked a bit more carefully, you would notice that all the dates for the submit date are between October and roughly November of a couple of years ago. So before the results were announced, right? What does that mean then? It means it was the day they entered the lottery. That's what it means. And I've actually taken that data. You don't have that data until the case has been scheduled. But I've taken that data in the past to show that the date of entry of the DV lottery is completely non-connected to, there's no preference in terms of, your chances of winning being the best on the first day or the last day or, third day of the entry period. There's no preference. It's completely random. I have shown that there are more entries at the beginning and at the end, and therefore there are more winners from the beginning and the end. But that doesn't mean that there's better chances from those two. It just correlates to the number of entries, right? The number of entries, if you had 2 days that you compared, one in the middle of the month and one at the beginning of the month, let's say, and at the beginning of the month you had twice as many entries than the middle of the month, you would also expect there should be twice as many selectees. It's as simple as that. the number of entries correlates to the number of selectees. So submit date, yeah, you should have known that one. That's kind of a rookie question if you just looked at the date. Is the only way to know if my DS260 has been processed to email KCC just to make sure? Yes, it is. That's the only way. You ask them if your DS260 has been processed, and they will respond to you saying your DS260 is still processing or your case is still processing. Or they might say your DS260 is fully processed and you're just waiting to be current. Or they may give you a response that says you are current for interview processing. And that means your DS260 is processed, but you're also current and you've been assigned to an AV queue for an embassy, right? And in that last situation, the AV status, you can't unlock your case. You can't move your case. There's nothing you can do at that point except, ride it out with that particular embassy. You're stuck in that queue for that embassy. So this is why I tell people, if you want to move your case, you have to do it before you become AV status. And the best way to move your case is to unlock your DS260 and change the address. You don't email KCC. Please listen to me. You don't email KCC and say, hey, I'm stuck at Addis. I want to be some other embassy. Please change my embassy. They will turn that down. They will decline that request. And so please don't be stupid enough to follow the advice of people that say to do that, because you're going to lose your chance. Okay. How you doing, boss? 3808 DV24. What have you done? There is no region there. Can't help you. There is a paper called DS1810 and DS260. It's about joining the military for an immigrant who is under 26 years old. Does this mean that if I filled it up, which is a must to fill, I will join them in the US? The form you're talking about is called selective service. It's a law in this country that every male under 26 has to sign up for selective service. It, in theory, means that if America was to go to war, they could conscript people. They could tell people you have to go off to war. Now, in reality, that isn't going to ever happen because warfare is highly technical these days. You don't just take some dude off the street and give him a gun and send him off to war, unless you're Putin, or unless you're defending your country from an arsehole like Putin, as would be the case in Ukraine, for example, right? So you generally don't do that. In America, we've already got 1 million people in our military. We don't have to conscript anyone to go kick anybody's ass. We can kick any country's ass, with the military we have, right? And there's a lot of technology. You don't just jump in a plane and start flying it. You don't just jump on an aircraft carrier and just, there's a lot of training that goes on, right? So you're not going to be conscripted, but it is a law of this country that you sign up for that. And you have to do that within 30 days of arriving in the USA. And so, make sure you take care of that. It is important that you comply with that law, right? And any 26-year-old male, it's not just for immigrants, any male under 26 has to do the same thing. Okay. All right. Is it worthy to change the embassy from Yerevan to another, which is faster for EU31X? Well, you have time to consider the performance of Yerevan against other embassies. You don't have to make that decision yet, because EU31X is not going to become current for some months, right? So I would say just wait and see, watch the performance carefully, see how Yerevan does, okay? Don't make a fast decision and then find you have to change back, right? Hi, Britt, I'm from Sri Lanka, case number AS22K. According to SEAC data, 9,000 are before me, 4,000 are below me. Do I have a chance of getting interviewed from the Colombo embassy? Again, same sort of answer I just gave to Narek just before. Your case number is in a fairly high range. It's going to be quite some time before we get there. So, you'll have to wait and see whether you've got a chance. I would say that there is some risk at your case number that's not necessarily to do with Colombo, but is to do with the Asia region as a whole. right? There isn't a guarantee that we're going to get to that case number as current. Okay. What about EU jump for March? EU isn't as over jumped as Africa, so we could see a more significant increase in EU than we should see in Africa. Now, just bear in mind that I tend to not get involved in predicting visa bulletins. I like to explain how it works, but I don't really want to give predictions because the logic is not necessarily what the visa office who control the visa bulletin are following. The people who are controlling the visa bulletin now are fairly new to it. I don't think they're very experienced or skilled at it yet. And also they have more information than I have available, right? So they could easily make a different decision than I would make just looking at the numbers. And so, I just wait and see what the visa bulletin will do. So, I have my opinions. I tend to not publish those opinions because, it doesn't, it's just a game, right? And, you will find out what the visa bulletin does when the visa bulletin is released. You don't need to have my prediction. My prediction doesn't help you in any way, right? So it's just a game, really. That's what I mean by it's a game. Does Africa's performance high as you expected, such that it threats the Asia winners like you projected previously? It doesn't threaten the Asia winners. It's not that Africa takes quota from Asia. It's the reverse that has happened in the past, right? Asia has taken unused quota from Africa. If, by your comment, you mean if Africa does well, then there isn't wasted visas for Asia to take. Yeah, that could be true. But we would need to see Africa get 24,000 visas. And to be perfectly honest, they're probably not going to get that. And other regions will take advantage of the unused visas. I'd like to see Africa get that, but that means that Africans and Africa as a region has to accelerate a little bit beyond what they're doing right now. I'm probably expecting to see 21, maybe 22,000 issued for Africa, which will be under their quota and would give a little bit of quota to the other regions to use. Hi, Fausto. Pleased to hear from you. I'm really waiting for the migrants tutorial with the signature, and you definitely deserve one. My apologies to you. Greetings from Houston. Thanks for all the help. Remember, everybody, change your all life is not easy. Change your all life is not easy. I don't know what that means. But yeah, it's tough. I think you're saying it's fairly tough for new immigrants in this country. By the time I write the book, Fausto, you could probably write a better book. I'm doing so bad on it. I'm sorry. But anyway, it's great to hear from you. Oshdeen Jonah says, AF 30,000 at Nairobi. But my case is still at MVC, yet numbers after me at Nairobi have been scheduled. Could this be a problem on my side? Okay, what it means is this. You should probably email KCC and ask if your DS-260 is processed. If it is, then you can expect to be scheduled probably in the next month. You would get a 2NL next month for what would be an April interview, right? If your DS-260 isn't processed yet, it means that you either submitted it fairly late or you submitted it early, but it took a long time to process for some reason. And there are some cases that have never unlocked that submitted in May of last year and are still not processed. There are some cases that take longer to process. And so, maybe your case is one of those. But if you want to know a little bit more, email KCC and ask them, is your case, your DS-260 processed? And you'll get a response that will tell you a little bit of information. Okay. Hello, Mr. Simon. Have a nice day. Asia, your prediction would be 9,000. 9,000 for issuances, not for case numbers, right? Now, as per SEAC data, almost 4,500 have been scheduled. So we can assume that half the selectees for Asia have been completed. No. Okay. Let me just let me put this back on. Okay. you're a little confused about how everything works, right? So let's look at DV 2023. In DV 2023, there were 9,600 visas issued in Asia. And in order to get that many, nearly 13,000 people were scheduled. Why are there so many more to be scheduled than actually get them? Well, some were left in ready status. So some of those cases were visa interviews that were cancelled. Some of those were people that were scheduled for an interview but never turned up for an interview. They're called no-shows. I call them no-shows, and there's quite a few of them. There will be every year. Some were refused permanently, right? 865. So not everybody that goes to an interview succeeds, right? And then some were on 221G and stayed on 221G until after the program ended, which meant that those people lost out, right? So there's about 2,000 people out of nearly 13,000 that either got refused or were temporarily refused, which is what 221G is. And so that's what, almost 20%, right? So 20% of people being scheduled will not succeed. They won't be issued. And then there'll be some people who just don't even turn up to the interview. And hopefully we won't see many interviews being cancelled like we did in September last year. But some people won't be approved, right? That's the way it works. So just therefore, you can't say that we've got 4,500 scheduled so far. Let's see if that's true. In Asia, we're talking about Asia, weren't we? Yeah. So in Asia, 4,500 people have been scheduled. But you probably will see this number get to about 12,000, right? So we're not halfway through, as your comment suggests. Okay, hope that makes sense. What's your prediction for a case number AF7180 Accra, Ghana? You have a chance. Accra is awful right now, terrible. Not scheduling many, but your case number is so low that you've probably got a chance, even if you're locked into Accra. If you were at a higher case number and you're locked in, if you're at a higher case number and you're not locked into Accra, then get the hell out of Accra, right? Get out of Ghana, go somewhere else, get your move to another country so you can get your interview scheduled somewhere else. But in your particular case, you would just sit and wait because your number is so low. Let's say there are 30 cases from Ghana for every 1,000. I don't know if that's right, but something like that. That means that by, let's say the 8th or 9th month of scheduling, they'll probably get to your case with, pretty easy bet that. Okay. Major Matata won't ask my of 39,000 for Nairobi. I would dismiss it as an obvious question. Love your work though. Thank you for being sensible enough to know what would be a daft question. Thank you. Appreciate you've been listening. Raul says, I'm a DV 2023 winner from Bolivia. Thanks for all the advice and help. I arrived in Washington, D.C. 6 months ago. I'm happier. I love this country that opened their doors to me. That's awesome. Love that. That's really good. Congratulations and welcome. Greetings from Thailand. Thailand 33,000, Asia, I presume. So that's a high case number. I hope you realize the risk. If you're in Asia, 33,000, that's quite a high case number. Do you think it will become Asia? Will Asia become current in the visa bulletin? No. Thanks, Owen, for the interview from all of us. You're very welcome. Case number is 103K. What is my hope? Very, very low. You should have given me a region, but obviously because it's such a high case number, it can only be Africa. Do I think Africa is going to go to 103,000? No, I don't. The only reason it would get to 103,000 is really bad performance in many of the embassies. And we do have bad performance in some of the embassies, but not as many embassies are not bad enough to make it so that we can get to 103,000. So I don't think we're going to get there. And I think also we jumped from 26,500 to 40,000. you may have celebrated a little bit because you've probably done some math and said, oh, that's almost 14,000 jump. If they did 14,000 jump every month, it'd be great. But that won't happen because, really the jump to 40,000 was not supported by the, that was too far. They went too far in one month. So unfortunately, they've got to slow down, I think, in the next month, maybe the next 2 months. Yeah, according to the analysis, case number AF, 114K will have no chance. Yeah, that's probably true. Hello, Britt. What did you do if your case number is 19,700 from Accra? Doesn't look like Accra will get better. That's going to be a risky number, okay? Because if you're already locked in to Accra, as you probably are, if your DS-260 was processed and you didn't change your address, then yeah, you're probably locked into an embassy that is not going to get to you, okay? Thanks for the explanation. Thanks very much. You're very welcome, Kareem. Adding above to the MVC question, I haven't traveled to any risky places. My DS-260 was submitted in August. You could have. People always say, well, I've got nothing on my background. I had a guy who I think on one of the videos or something said, well, where do you live? It was literally, I think it was right slap bang in the middle of the Middle East. I mean, geographically right in the middle of the Middle East. And this guy says, well, what could possibly be the problem with my country? And I'm like, well, it's a Muslim country in the middle of the Middle East. You're surrounded by all sorts of chaos, like wars and terrorism concerns and everything else. All the stuff that scares the crap out of Americans, and Americans think they need to go and drop bombs on people about. You're right in the middle of all of that, right? And so you may not think you're a bad person. You're probably not. But if you come from one of those countries where there is a perception that there's a lot of terrorism or anti-American feeling or whatever, there's going to be more background checking. And also your name could match someone who's on the terrorism list, or by connection, you could actually be connected to someone on the terrorism list. And so, they're going to do more background checking in some cases. So you could also be, by the way, you could have a certain career, certain sort of job that causes you to be processed slow. An obvious one would be nuclear weapons expert, for example. There could be various things, and it's not just the Middle East. There's all sorts of situations which can cause a longer period of background checking. May I know, Asia, Burma, start backlogging or not? Please kindly review this. You're not going to have a look, are you? Okay. Let's have a look here. Burma. Okay, so here's how you would look, right? So they took 84 interviews in the first 3 months, and they took 18 this month. And they're at case number, under case number 8,000, right? So, but they are, let's see, they're mainly, they're Asia, nothing from Africa, nothing from EU, OC, obviously, and SA, right? So it's all Asian case numbers. So, Asian, let's see the visa bulletin. Look at that one. Let's have a look at the latest. So you've got the February visa bulletin, which has got the latest numbers, right? So you can look at this. I'm just showing you how you could have done this yourself, right? So the Asia region is up to 7,000, right? And the interviewing for Burma is up to 7,000, meaning they're not really backlogged at all. If this number was back at 3,000 or at 4,000 and there were no interviews beyond that, then that would be evidence that they're not up to date and that they have a backlog. So although 18 cases is not very many, it doesn't matter because they're completely up to or nearly up to date in terms of the number there. They're not backlogged, right? So calm down. It's okay. You're fine. You could have done that yourself. I've explained that many times. But yeah, that's what's going on. Okay. Any chance for 51K in Morocco? That's the level of daft question, right? Number one, you didn't give me the region, but I'll assume it's Africa. You're in Morocco, but Morocco is doing really well. And your case number is obviously not too high. So really, it's a daft question because it should be very obvious. The answer should be very obvious. You haven't got a problem. What does KCC considers most in processing DS260? The date of submission or one's case number? Mine, not done. 44,000 submitted on June. Okay, so cases are opened in case number order, right? Sorry, not in case number order. Date of submission order, not case number order, right? They start on the May lot, and then they start on the June lot, and then the July lot, and so on, right? They're moving through. It doesn't matter if your case number 122,000. You may have had your DS260 already processed if you submitted in May or June or something like that. And then you'll say, okay, well, why isn't mine processed? Well, yeah, I don't know you. I don't know what your background is, etc. But there might be something about your background that required extra processing. If it is true that your DS260 is not processed, right? And the only way you can know that, by the way, is by emailing KCC. So, hopefully you're telling me that you emailed KCC and they've said it's not processed yet. But anyway, they open them in order of submission, and then different cases take different lengths of time. Some will be processed very quickly, some will take longer, right? That's just the way it works. So yeah, you submitted yours mid-June. By that time, there's over a month of cases before you. It would have been, a little bit late by the time they got to it. And then there's probably some reason why your background checking takes a little bit longer. By the way, one other reason I don't think I mentioned earlier is that if you live in a country that doesn't have very good standards of record keeping, for various reasons, either it's a sort of a developing country that doesn't have very good record keeping, or there's been sort of civil wars and that sort of thing that lost a lot of records, thinking about Sudan, for example, then there is going to be a lot more background checking because they have to try and figure out other ways of background checking you, right? And so, and it may, the country you're in may not have good records, may not be cooperative, and therefore it takes longer. It's as simple as that, right? And there may be concerns, by the way, if also your country has had some sort of civil war or has had some sort of genocide, that sort of thing. They want to know where you're involved in that, because one of the ineligibilities for a green card is if you are involved in, for example, child trafficking, genocide, those sort of things, and wars, coups, and that sort of thing can render you ineligible if they find out that you were part of that, right? So they're doing what they can do to find any information on you prior to your interview being scheduled. Okay. Okay. What is the reason for the delay in processing the DS260 and this is slow? By the way, one other thing, like my friend that just asked about the June submissions. Remember, there has not been many years where we've had over 140,000 people selected, right? And KCC, with the way that they operate, have to process all of those DS260s. So it is without a doubt going to be the hardest year they've had for a number of years, probably all the years, in terms of the volume of DS260s they've got to process. So it shouldn't be surprising to anyone that here now in January, they're still processing, that they're not complete. It shouldn't be a surprise because they've had so many cases submitted to them and they have to process them all, right? So whereas in a normal year, I normally expect DS260 processing to be complete by about December, maybe January. In DV 2023, I think it was about January, February before they were complete. In DV 2024, I'm expecting that to be more like March or maybe even April before they're caught up with all the backlog of DS260 processing. And Then in May, all the new DS260s come firing in from DV25, right? So they are trying to complete, I promise you, they're trying to complete by April to get through all of the backlog of DS260 processing, but there must be a huge amount of work. And it's, it works against, when they select a lot of people, it works against them. It's not a great thing. Okay, so let me just choose a couple more. I have to go and pick up my daughter, so I'm just going to pick one or two more questions and then we'll call it a day. Do you think the selectees are already chosen by now? If so, why do they take so long to release the results? Yes, they have already selected the selectees for DV 2025. What they will have done is they would have taken every single entry and they would have given every entry randomly a case number in a random order, right, within the regions. And now what they're doing now between sort of now and May is they go through various levels of screening to make sure that those cases are not fraudulent entries, that the photos were valid photos, that they were not duplicates. They're looking for people that previously committed fraud to weed those cases out, etc. And so they go through a number of processes in order to then announce the winners. And they disqualify a lot of cases. That's how we have things called holes, right? So if we had 50,000 case numbers in a region, starting at 1 to 50,000, there would not be 50,000 actual cases in that range. There's going to be a number of holes. And those holes are cases that get disqualified. And they get disqualified at this time, like before the results are announced, right? By the time the results are announced, there will be people who are told that they've not been selected when actually they had a low case number, but they got kicked out because they put an invalid photo for themselves or for one of the derivatives, or because they figured out that that person did multiple entries, or various other security checks. Okay. If I see on Zarthisius that the Israeli embassy had cases on January 19th of 24, does it mean that it's open and processed DV cases? Yes, it means that they accepted the cases. Now, could they cancel those cases, those interviews for March? Yeah, they could do, but they're accepting those cases at the moment. That's what it means, yes. Okay. Oh, here we go. ICC, I did some calculations, see what 51K in Cairo would correspond to from what case number from last year, and see if it's possible for this year based on last year. But I know that I can't compare different years. Yeah, it's a bit difficult comparing different years, but you can make a sort of you can make an estimation. Perhaps I'll do a video on how to estimate that. I did talk through, if you're on the channel, the Telegram channel that I go on, have a search through my comments. I sort of talked someone through, somebody asked me to do this calculation for them. And I didn't do that because I would always rather teach a man to fish than give him a fish. Because if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life. And if you give him a fish, he'll be hungry tomorrow, right? So I helped this person just sort of step by step. I went through the calculation, and this guy came back with a correct calculation. Which was on Addis, I think. And so you could do the same thing. It's a fairly simple process to do that if you know where Cairo cuts off, right, or Egypt. If you know where it cuts off, then you can work out how many cases there are per 1,000, and you can calculate things pretty accurately. Okay. One more quick question. I emailed KCC and they changed my interview from Abu Dhabi to Kathmandu. I'm from Nepal. Should I follow any further procedure? I hope you didn't lie to them, right? If you moved to Kathmandu because you said you were living in Kathmandu, that's okay. But if you have to update your address, then do that. Now, Kathmandu embassy is great. They're probably not going to refuse you whatever happens, particularly as you're Nepalese. But don't lie to KCC at any time, right? So don't create a trail of lying. Okay. All right, everybody. So I'll call that a day. Got to go and get my kid. But I hope everyone's having a great day. Please give me a thumbs up on this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And watch out for more videos over the coming days. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.